Greetings, metaphysicians. Thank you so much for tuning into this episode 76. Oh my gosh, it's our third anniversary. May 1st is our third birthday. Thank you so much for joining us. This episode is all about consciousness, the different levels of consciousness, how everyone has different varying levels of truth, but we are all going to the same destination. And we have very special exclusive content for our angel donors today. Stay tuned and enjoy the episode.
You're listening to Let's Get Metaphysical. This podcast explores the spiritual and metaphysical world through the experiences and opinions of the host and those interviewed. It should not necessarily be seen as direct endorsement or personal advice to our listeners. We encourage you to use your own discernment, judgment, and intuition regarding anything you learn from this show.
Let's get meta.
Welcome to the Let's Get Metaphysical Podcast. I'm your host, Renata Maniaci, here to remind you that you are a divine spiritual being having a temporary human experience in a human body here on lovely planet Earth. It is almost our third birthday, so we're going to start this celebration now, but May 1st is the official third birthday of the Let's Get Metaphysical podcast. I cannot even believe it. What a journey it has been. It's been such a pleasure to be doing this, to interview all the amazing guests and people that I've had on the podcast. It's been a pleasure to allow new episodes to come through just me. It's such a journey. And that's kind of what this episode is all about. What came through today from the masters and angels and my high self is all about how we are all at varying levels of consciousness and we are all at varying stages in our own evolutionary journey. And that was a really beautiful message that came through. But before we get there, I wanted to remind everyone that my gift to you all is the Let's Get Meta Master Clearing. This is a free master clearing that I did for all of you. If you're ready to raise your vibration, go to letsgetmeta.com and click on the Let's Get Meta Master Clearing. That is an entire clearing that I did just for all of you listeners. Thank you for listening to the podcast. That's my gift to you. After this episode, we also have some really great exclusive content that came through, and I will tell you more about that after the main part of the episode. So let's just jump right into that right now. Are you ready? Let's get meta. Masters and angels, I request your presence, your guidance, and your support through this transmission. Please allow whatever needs to come through me, and please allow it to reach whomever it needs to reach. Thank you with gratitude and full faith. Bless creation. So much happening in the world at this moment. There is much more happening than meets the eye. There are very many levels of activity, and some of them are seen, some of them are unseen. And some of the unseen levels and layers of activity will become visible over time, especially to those whose awareness keeps growing and expanding and accelerating, which on some level is everyone on the planet in their own time, at their own pace, because we all have our own journeys that we are on, with our own challenges, our own shifts that need to take place. So it is an individual journey, but it is also a collective journey. And of these many things that are happening now on the both seen and unseen levels on the planet, much is transforming, in a sense, more so than ever before on this planet. Life is going to change and be very different for the grand majority of the people on this planet, for the beings on this planet. You've all chosen we've all chosen an incredible moment to be here. And everyone is doing their part. Everyone is playing a role. Do not hate anyone for playing their role. Help yourself by asking support and allowing people to be and play out the roles that they need to play out. There are varying levels of truth depending on the level of consciousness that a being is. For example, in lower levels of consciousness, there are truths at that level of consciousness that as we raise in vibration, raise in the level of consciousness, the truth that encapsulates those lower vibrations and those lower consciousness changes and expands. If you think of little Russian dolls that kind of all go into each other, there's the smallest one. And at that level of consciousness, that smallest Russian doll level of consciousness, that is true. That being is that tall and weighs that much, and that is true, so to speak. And then as you raise in consciousness, maybe that's the next level of the Russian doll, the next larger one. And there's a truth there that encapsulates the smaller and is therefore a greater truth, and on and on and on. In this way, we must understand and allow our levels of discernment to evolve with us as our consciousness evolves and grows. For example, your level of consciousness, your level of understanding was different when you were 3 than it was when you were 13. Things that you understood to be true in how the world worked when you were 3 changed and evolved by the time you were 13. You had a different perspective, a different vibration, a different level of consciousness, and were able to see things in a different way. And it's not that you were wrong when you were 3. That is what you saw. That is the perception that you had at that time. And it was not wrong. And as you grew in your level of consciousness as a being on this planet, with the rules of this planet and the laws of this planet, and as you grew and evolved your level of consciousness, those perspectives changed. You saw something that you maybe understood differently when you were 3 as something else, maybe completely different when you were 13. And when you're 13, those perspectives, those are also true. That level of consciousness, the way that you see the world, is true for you. And yet, when you're 23, your level of consciousness has changed. For most people, you raise in your level of consciousness. And perspectives and beliefs and understandings and knowings that you had when you were 13 are different when you're 23. And it doesn't mean that you were wrong about your perspectives when you were 13. But you have new, wider understandings when you're 23. And these are now true for you. And so it goes on and on and on. And what it is, this is a very important lesson in discernment, and a very important lesson in allowing people, humans, to be where they are. Because I'm not just referring to age. I'm not just referring to earth age. I'm using earth age 3, 13, 23 as a metaphor so that you can understand this concept more fully. Everyone around us is at different levels of consciousness. And we tend to be attracted to the levels of consciousness that we are at. That is why in your friend group, in your family group, in your soul group, you may feel the most comfortable because you are all around the same level of consciousness. And it may be why you feel uncomfortable around other groups, other families, other ways of being, because it is a level of consciousness that is different than yours. And there's nothing wrong with that. And your level of consciousness where you're at and where you see and how you understand the world around you and how you understand the information that is coming in through you, into you, how you understand the world at your level of consciousness is okay. Because that's where you are. That's your perception. That's how you're understanding the world around you. And yet there are other levels of consciousness. A very crude level of understanding this is there are groups, families who may feel that abuse in some way, corporal punishment, hitting, for example, is okay, is a fine way to correct a behavior that they feel is inappropriate, maybe in a child, for example. That's a level of consciousness. For that group or that family, that is the level of consciousness that they are at. That level says that this is an acceptable way to correct a undesirable behavior. And of course, there are other groups and other levels of consciousness that are different and believe that that is not an acceptable way to correct an undesirable behavior. And this goes on and on and on. As you can imagine, there are endless, infinite examples of different levels of consciousness. What is important to understand is that the level of consciousness goes up, and there are infinite levels of consciousness as you raise in vibration and as you continue in evolution. So back to the age example, where you were when you were 3, there's nothing wrong with that because that's where you were and that's how you understood the world. And on a big picture, in the grand scale of things, that is a place where you have been in that level of consciousness. And when you're 33, that is also a place that you have been in terms of level of consciousness. And it is different. The perspective is different. You would not do the same things, speak the same way, believe the same as when you were 3, because it is different. And in this way, we must understand the ever-increasing line of levels of consciousness. And with each passing day, consciousness raises little by little. It keeps raising and raising. So we must not hate or berate or take offense, and this is hard to understand, at beings, human beings who are at a lower level of consciousness than you. Just as you must not hate or berate or have judgment on beings, human beings, who may be at a higher level of consciousness than you. It is hard to explain and to talk about this topic without humans feeling self-conscious about where they might be, or that this person is better or worse, or less evolved or more evolved than you, when it is not actually about that at all. Every being has been or will be at every level of consciousness at some point on their soul's journey. This is a normal evolution of how souls work in the nature of the universe, the universes of the multiverse of the multiverses. And so there is a level of consciousness where you can be a bit more neutral, a bit more objective about all the other levels of consciousness there are. And instead of a level of consciousness that is different than yours, evoking a reaction, evoking an emotional outburst or feeling, you can observe a different level of consciousness from yours with somewhat of a distance, with somewhat of a neutrality, and even with somewhat of a compassion for where that human being is in their journey. There need not be the visceral, emotional reactiveness that many human beings feel when they encounter or observe a group or a family or etc. of beings, of humans acting, believing, speaking, doing in a level of consciousness that you are no longer at. One doesn't need to react to other levels of consciousness. What is true for that group or that family in their level of consciousness may not be true for you at your level of consciousness. And there need not be an emotional reaction to that. There need not be a feeling that you must change them, that you must evolve them, that you must tell them what the truth really is. And that is very difficult. That can be a very difficult thing to do, or in this case, to not do. To allow someone or some group or some family to be where they are in their own level of consciousness without reaction is the direction that we all need to go. Let me rephrase. I said need to go. It is a direction that is possible for all of us on the planet. Observing and allowing other human beings to be where they are at their current level of consciousness, with their current system of beliefs, with their current truths that are true for them based on their experience, their soul journey, their evolution, and their perspective, and their life experiences in this life and past lives is okay. Where they are is okay. Their level of consciousness is okay, and it is perfect for them. And your level of consciousness and your understanding and your evolution and what you see to be true and know to be true for you is perfect for you. And I haven't always been there myself, and it is difficult every day at times to be in this observer state, attempting to be in neutrality and to have compassion for any human for where they are at, if they truly believe what they believe and perceive what they perceive and believe to be true what they believe to be true at that moment in their level of consciousness. It's a beautiful thing to allow another human to be expressing themselves on their own soul's journey without reaction and without having the desire to change them. And it's not easy because some of these beings might be in your family and you might be at very different levels of consciousness. They might be in your friend group, and you might be at very different levels of consciousness. They might be in your community, and you might be in very different levels of consciousness. Or they might be in a different workspace or political arena or sports team or spiritual or religious organization or school education system. You can think of all of these different things as having their own level of consciousness. Every human, every individual has their own level of consciousness, but then every group, every organization, every family, every school, every healthcare system, every book, every radio show, every movie, every newspaper, we can go on forever, even trees, even things in nature, even buildings have their own level of consciousness. The level of consciousness of a weathered down ancient shack that's crumbling is a different level of consciousness for that building and that structure than a cathedral holds. They're different levels of consciousness that reside within those structures. But it's all nature. It's all part of creation. It's all part of this world. And so why judge it? You can make choices as to who you surround yourself with, where you go, what you do, how you react or don't react. And that's your prerogative. But we don't need to become reactive or emotional because someone else is on a different stage in their journey. And I come back to this piece because it's so difficult for humans to grasp this. There is no better or worse. There is no, I'm at a higher level of consciousness, therefore I am better, and they are at a lower level of consciousness, so they are worse. That is not real. It is a journey. If you were hiking, let's say, a path up to Machu Picchu, and you are on the 5th day of that journey, and maybe you're hiking for 10 days before you get there, you don't look back at the people who are on day 1 and think that you're better than them, because they're on the journey just like you are, and the destination is the same. The destination is the same. I touched on varying levels of discernment based on your perspective, based on your level of consciousness. And that changes. I've used this example many times on this podcast of my own spiritual evolution, which, to be honest, is really kind of, you look at the evolution of my podcast episodes from episode 1 till now, and it's really a journey of my own evolution. It's kind of an experience that I've just been living alongside and sharing alongside this show, with my first 2 episodes being about the now infamous John of God. That was a level of consciousness and an experience that I do not regret. And it helped me to evolve and to move forward and to attune and fine-tune my own level of discernment. And that's a beautiful thing for everyone, and we all do it in different ways as we all continue to move on and move forward in our evolutionary soul journeys. We recognize and realize that the things that we thought were one way are maybe another way. And that's normal. So as you raise in your level of consciousness, as you keep moving forward on your evolutionary soul journey, take stock of how you have evolved and changed. And don't judge yourself for your journey. Don't judge anyone else for their journey. The destination is the same. Masters and angels, I request that you help all of us to release all types of judgment towards ourselves and others, and to release this energy of judgment from our bodies, cells, and fluids in all lifetimes, timelines, and dimensions. Thank you with gratitude and full faith. Masters and angels, I request that you help each and every one of us to see with crystal clarity everything as it is, exactly how we are meant to perceive it at our current level of consciousness. And please help us to love that, love where we are, and to love where everyone else is at on their evolutionary journey. Thank you with gratitude and full faith. I'm going to leave this transmission here for today. Thank you to the Master Angels for helping to guide this transmission. Bless creation. Thank you so much for listening, all you metaphysicians out there. I hope that you got something out of this episode. We are going to celebrate the 3rd anniversary of the podcast all throughout the month of May. I'm going to be sending a special gift to anyone who becomes an angel donor throughout the month of May. And also we'll throw in the month of April because we had some awesome people join during the month of April as well. As an angel donor, you have access to each and every bonus or exclusive content we've ever had on this podcast. And speaking of which, today's exclusive content for this episode is a clearing that I have done around consciousness, around releasing judgment and reactivity for yourself and for where everyone else is at on their evolutionary journey. To access this, go to patreon.com/up and awaken. We hope to see you there. And again, come access this all throughout April and the month of May for a special gift from me to you. Thank you again for listening. Stay positive, stay safe, and stay meta.
The Let's Get Metaphysical podcast is an Up and Awaken production. Our intention is to raise the vibration of the planet by sharing, validating, and normalizing spiritual and metaphysical experiences. If you are ready to raise your vibration, you might enjoy our free Master Clearing. To receive the Master Clearing or to learn more about the podcast, visit letsgetmeta.com. The show is produced and hosted by Renata Maniaci, co-creator of Up and Awaken Productions. To access more awakening content, to join our membership community, or to become one of our angel donors, please visit upandawaken.com. Thank you for listening. Stay meta.
Let's get meta. Metaphysical. Let's get meta. Metaphysical. Let's get meta. Metaphysical. Let's get meta. Metaphysical.